Good morning to you, good afternoon, good evening to you, my friends, wherever you may be in the world today. Alan Clements here from blessed Bali in Ubud at Uada Yoga Dharma Studio. And this is the second talk in a series of 7 talks that began last week, every Tuesday and Sunday, until the final talk on March 5th here in Bali. And the subject today is new for me, kind of coming out of the existential closet, especially here in this sacred land of Bali. Psychedelics. And how can you talk that deeply, fully about something so provocative and profound and luminous as the word psychedelic, mind manifesting? I dare even hear myself. It sounds so utterly cliched, like embodiment, felt reality. But when you are on some form of microdose or medium dose, or I don't even use the word heroic dose, but something that's connected to your integrity, to your emotionality. The psychedelic, the entheogen, for me, it's primarily revealed my beingness, I would say, in real time. And I'm very, not anti, but very anti-hallucinatory. There's already enough illusion and propaganda and hallucination in my own personal conditioning that I've seen over the years, now going on 5+ decades of meditation. I want to be very careful with, that's not like sitting meditation alone. It's an all posture approach to beingness in all context, including all states of mind, all degrees of complexity. And I call that world Dharma, or finding liberation through living. Okay, so psychedelics, and it's not a corollary term, entheogenic, entheogenesis, entheogens. It points to a type of implicit awakening of beingness for the purpose of feeling into, and I'm cautious with this word, divinity, spirituality, even capital A awakening. Those have been used and abused, and they're powerful ways to describe existence on the terms of a conscious engagement of consciousness. A conscious engagement of consciousness is, in fact, for me, a phrase synonym for the word meditation, the conscious engagement of consciousness in context, with all states of mind, all degrees of complexity, all times, past, present, future, and the nuministic, beyond the physics of what we consider to be the theory of relativity and all the things that come with the physics of human existence in the paradigm of what we know to be human life in the world that we know it. There are things, obviously, that exceed, to state something so obvious, that exceed cognitive ability. Pause, Alan. Psychedelics and entheogens, the first element of the talk, meditation, out of the box, the wisdom 2.0 of meditation, the wisdom, for me, of psychedelic 2.0, and Buddhist psychology, which is basically the more sophisticated terminology of my own personal background. And I might add here that although there is a theoretical element to Buddhist psychology, as there is to meditation, as there is to psychedelics, it is implicit, generally speaking, that these 3 words, which really excite me, they point to, 1, come and see for yourself the truth of something. And it's called, in Buddhist Pali language, the language of traditional Theravada Buddhism, unlike Sanskrit, which is very rooted in Tibetan Buddhism and, of course, Indian theologies. But This ehipassiko is an invitation for the individual. Maybe you, wherever you sit, walk, listen to this talk, you have felt that calling that you must taste for yourself the truth of something, right? I want to know love. I want to know it from a direct experiential, and I dare even add the word here. When we use the word sacred and divinity, for me, I use messiness a lot of the time, difficulty, complexity. So when I hear the word entheogen and psychedelic and healing and overcoming trauma and all the ways in which divinity looks sacred, if I do the ritual right from Peru to Vancouver to Ubud, and I find my holy tribe and I understand my different attachment styles and boundaries of safety and all the various ways to coordinate my existence on the terms of the sacred, somehow it's going to work out okay. It won't work out okay. We all get old and disease and die, and we have to face things that are very uncomfortable. Pause again. You know, my history is deeply embedded in Burma, undergoing a genocide for the 5th time in 5 decades. Not a pretty word. I've been up close to genocide. I wrote a first book about it, Burma, the Next Killing Fields, 1989, with a foreword by His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. I don't say that with accolades. It blew my FUKING mind and heart wide open after years in a monastery. I met girls and boys there that were living out of the robes of the monastery who took up arms, and they threw those AK-47s in my heart and chest and said, "Hey dude, you're an American, you can leave any time, but what if your wife, your brother, your sister that was being raped and killed? What would you do, Mr. Peace Giver?" And I had to really confront attitudes and platitudes and dogmas. Okay. My point here isn't to draw attention to the drama and the melodrama of life, but when I use the word psychedelics and entheogens and meditation and Buddhist psychology and come and see for yourself, it's implicit, for me, irresponsible not to talk about the attributes of independent inquiry, not being funneled towards an outcome, but to be so supported in your journey of awakening and adventure that you include and you include and you include that too, so that the essence of all these 3 vocations, psychedelics, meditation, Buddhist psychology, the art of noticing, okay? If you were to distill and you were to run off and do what you needed to do today, I take it home with you in your heart. The art of noticing is intrinsic to the conscious use of psychedelics. Not the proclivity towards gurus and various shamanistic goddesses that are holding sacred space for you, and implicitly in that kind of unspoken existential spiritual extended kind of projection plasticity that goes often on with therapists and clients. Next thing you know, you're conforming to the belief of what you think you need to do in order to feel healed by the terms of the shaman. But if that person or that girl or that God or that truth was one of, hey, there are no 2 of us that do it alike, right? My fingerprint is my guru. No 2 of us will kiss alike. No 2 of us will touch each other alike. No 2 of us will walk alike, kiss alike, make love alike. No 2 enlightenments alike, right? So freedom, in a way, jumping right along here, 3/4 of the way through, and we'll open it up to questions, is why bother to notice? And this is something very difficult for me to share, but very important for me to understand and not be afraid to share it, is this concept of why it matters to challenge the act of not looking, challenge the act of looking away. You know, I don't know about you, but I feel very comfortable at times, embedded, immersed, infused, blissfully ignorant of a range over the years of, I don't even like using the word addictions, including sacred addictions, breathing, empowerment, until you go to a war zone now, and the next thing you know, you're crumbling in the face of complexity when your partner who's with you is telling you, fuck, what'd you do in a monastery, dude? We're 3 miles from the front line, and you're telling me what? This is an act of conscience and integrity, Alan. And so it's very important for me to keep open to the change of context, how I turn away, how I'm certain about things that aren't really true in my deeper sense of ability, how to stay open, freedom of mind. And so freedom for me is, if I were to define anything based upon the act of noticing, it's informed for me by what Noam Chomsky, the great linguist and political savant in America, 93 years old, in his phrasing that the best form of spirituality, and I'm going to quote this very clearly and slowly, is to practice spiritual self-defense. And to me, that is the act of noticing and understanding both the appropriateness of the act at times of turning away. You just cannot include everything on the terms of its complexity. Sometimes you need to know the boundary of how much you can do. Very crucial. I'm talking about navigational wisdom here. NW. How to distill everything about the psychedelic experience? Empowered navigational wisdom. The art of independent thinking, deep inquiry, the art of noticing, the noticing of the act of turning away, learning how to mindfully and intelligently embrace these different states of consciousness on the palette of your own inner mind. That's meditation. It's the study of SOMs, states of mind, or SOCs, states of consciousness. The last thing here about Buddhist psychology. And why it's important is based upon this word that's very rarely used in spiritual, psychological, shamanistic, psychedelic circles. I don't know why. Samsara. S-A-M-S-A-R-A. And the other word, which is rarely used, is Dharma, D-H-A-R-M-A, or the Pali equivalent with a few changes, D-H-A-M-M-A. Samsara, what does that point to? I don't know about you, but in my early days of psychedelic exploration prior to my monastic years, I had done it a fair amount of time from the age of 15 to 25. And I did it, I guess, not so recreational. It was like, at that time, it was like the questions of war and peace were so prevalent in America. And the proclivity towards capitalistic futures of monogamous relationships with heterosexual partners living kind of affluent lives with poetry and philosophy and children and farms and not free love, but more poetic novel life. And it was like, God, you know, I was with the same woman for nearly 7 years. And it was like, what are we going to do? And it became an issue of like, what the hell is life about? I know this is kind of almost too much, but the word samsara was the only word that I've ever come across that begins to even speak to the context of a few of the attributes of why it's important. Beginningless life. Okay, think of, okay, no first cause. How many of us have become acquainted over the years with DeFi, blockchain, you know, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, Chainlink, all the various ways that we have a decentralized network of mathematics with smart contracts that don't have centrality. Samsara is an infinite organic blockchain without a beginning of consciousness called samsara. And the Buddha, among all the various people in India, was the only one who used that term to describe beginningless pasts, infinite futures, and I teach and offer one thing and one thing alone. The deep power of paying attention and noticing that which is present as a condition in the here and now, and keeping an open mind about what it is that you see, how is it unique, how does it behave, and what did you learn? So, to, in a nutshell, Buddhist psychology, meditation, psychedelics, if I were to encourage anyone, including my 17-year-old daughter, keep in mind the distillation of all these very esoteric teachings today. It's almost impossible to understand the meaning imbued in the words that are being used today. So the art of language is very important. But look and see for yourself. I would never be satisfied with wanting to think that drinking tea as an idea satisfied the need to drink tea sip by sip. I would never in a million years think that I could sleep without actually lying down and actually sleep as the direct experience. I would never be satisfied with knowing what dreams were like without actually sleeping and awakening to dream states. I would never know what a psychedelic was like if I only relegated it to an idea. I would never know what meditation was like if I did not beg or imbue or embark on actual practice of the embodied state of beingness to illuminate consciousness. I would never know what it was like to be in an ocean unless I took off whatever I needed to take off and to be immersed in the water. Dharma and samsara beg the immediacy of direct experience. Psychedelics, meditation, and Buddhist psychology are the navigational tools, not for you, for me, to wisely and openly learn from the context of samsara for the purpose of illuminating beautiful states of mind. Meditation in Buddhist psychology is known as bhavana, the beautification of mind, and the overcoming of self-generated complexity. So it's the study of conflict-producing conditions of consciousness and illuminating states of consciousness, and the mindful intelligence to understand the distinction, to release one, to elevate the other. And that is the essence of these three personal domains. And I know this is just a peripheral talk, and I want to conclude here before we end and open it up to the questions that people have here, and maybe you have, is that we're almost near going public with a 10-day retreat that we are offering to the world here in Ubud, November 24th to December 3rd of this year, at one of the most beautiful temple resorts in the world, Arma, here right in Ubud. And what's unique about it, among the few of us that are organizing it, we want to offer it freely. It's not unique. I mean, there's lots of places in Asia which they openly offer their teachings and whatever they do there on donations. We want to provide food freely, we want to open the retreat up freely, and even more so, we want to have not a luxury retreat, but a non-residential retreat where people can come to practice and embody together how we live in the world without interrupting that placement of where we live, and come together for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours a day and immerse ourselves in the practices of what I'm sharing today, and along with writing exercises. And if you're interested, we're going to take 100 people and no questions asked. It's just simply you commit to the 10 days, find a place that's good for you to abide. We'll provide the meals, and if you so choose to offer a donation, that's completely your choice. But that's going to be coming public shortly, so that what you feel today that's inspired you or touched you or confused you, just know you have an opportunity, should you wish to take it up, to participate in that particular activity. So I hope there was something of value today that touched you, that inspired you. And I do know that I've neglected a little bit about Buddhist psychology, but that is it's actually called Experiential Process Buddhist Psychology. And it's the employment of mindful intelligence, MQ, like emotional intelligence, EQ, but MQ, that is the practice of finding liberation through living in all circumstances. And that's what's very, very unique about Buddhist psychology, is that there's no place that it's not applicable. And if you were to use entheogens or psychedelics skillfully, and I would only recommend that it be done in which you can still walk, for me, you can still talk, you can write, you can communicate, super low doses in which you don't feel that you are being taken over by something, but you are the agency. That, to me, is the conscious use of the entheogen. But I'm just an individual singing my sermon scream, and if you so choose, but just do it safely. But that's how I use it. And so if you have questions today, please email me. I'll do my best to answer them. And if you are here in the group and you have things that you want to talk about, I'm all in, and hope to see you and listen to the next part of the sharing today. And we'll be back on Tuesday at 11 a.m. here from Ubud. So thank you from my heart for tuning in. So that is my little rave, and if you have anything you want to talk about or question or just share, I'm all in to hear, and we can just get down. So take a moment, or anything you want more talk about, that kind of thing.
You're talking about spiritual shield or spiritual...
You're welcome to bring a chair up closer, of course. Absolutely.
Soft.
Please take your time.
I don't remember the words exactly you used, but you were talking about be courageous to take off the spiritual shield.
Say again? A little bit louder.
Courageous to take off the spiritual shield.
Take off the spiritual feeling. Shield. I use the word shield?
I don't know if you
I don't think I used the word shield. But you can use it, of course, obviously. To take off a spiritual shield?
Yeah.
May I ask you?
In that meaning, you talked about it. I don't quite remember the words.
I am, as I hear it, maybe, I often forget everything, and sometimes I remember what I want to remember, but, the word shield is a little bit annoying to me to hear it. So if I even alluded to it, it sort of sucks.
You didn't.
Even the word boundary to me is a little bit inflexible. I like navigational, cognitive placements of integrity that are malleable based upon who I'm with and when I'm doing it. But I'm a stickler for language because I've been around the loop, and it's so easy for me to become evangelical in the continuity of unchallenged ideas. And so, but the word shielding, may I ask what you mean by that? What's a spiritual example of a spiritual shield? There's another way of talking about a propaganda.
I do remember you saying something similar. Spiritual
Similar,
armor,
yeah.
or something like that.
Say again? Dogma.
Spiritual armor.
Armor.
To put it on, I think he said.
Put it on. Only around men. And then spiritual men. And then if you use the shaman word, run.
Mm-hmm.
Guru, absolutely. Take their money and then run. And put ayahuasca in their mouth and say, be happy. There are places to hold it, places to walk around it. I often have seen the importance of screaming, of yelling, of running, of walking around. I remember I once encountered a massive ass python. Not a python, yeah, a cobra, a king cobra in Sri Lanka. I used to live in the jungle. And the jungles in Sri Lanka are like loud with birds and monkeys, and all of a sudden when there's a king cobra, everything goes crazy silent. And I've been warned about these things, but you can't outrun them. And they're damn fast. They're like 25 miles per hour. They can wither. And those dudes get up at eye contact at about 10 feet away. They do their little mesmerizing story. And that's like a very important place for me to have psychic, cognitive, existential armor. because they can bite through that armor, and you're right there simultaneously. I remember prepared to die, prepared to run, and to prepare to engage simultaneously, because it was a no-win and a win-win, and the only way that I was trained is you make contact through your armor. And so sometimes you can't run. I've met women in Burma who are friends of mine who are political prisoners. You know, one of the sidelines I've done in my life is to study the mindset of prisoners of conscience, not yogis and meditators who can find peace generally nowhere except in their own narcissism. No offense, I do theater sometimes, and I practice theater when I do these so-called sincere talks that I'm pathetic at. But a lot of these women and men who were imprisoned had no choice but to develop incredible, what's the word? Not resilience, but you had to really know a container for your sanity, they would say. Is that armor? Is that shield? Like, Alan, we had to know ourselves so fully. If we gave over to fear, anxiety, we'd lost our immunity. We would die of the diseases. The food wasn't even fit for dogs. So when I use the word armor or shield or allude to that, I would keep a lot of flexibility and not think that it's in some way a commandment, but just know that there are places in life where you've got to see the movement of someone trying to mesmerize you through their spiritual lingo or their hands-on behavior without consent. In Bosnia, there were 25,000 women routinely gang raped, justifiable to get the ethnicity out of them, and pregnancy was the ethnic cleansing. Broadcast on national television to the other sides. So it's like armor. And the other thing is, the art of the question is something I've learned also, which kind of, although I'm looking behind the armor and the shield, I've got sunglasses on that allow me to see you more clearly. You know, those higher kind of trans Ray-Ban that have lenses. So you are using a bit of a superpower as well as a protection. So my way of saying, oh, this is very complicated. Design your own, be your spiritual design. I'm a real believer that there is no one who is our, yes, inspiration, yes, mentoring. But when it goes beyond mentoring through consent, I back off from that. I'm anathema to the word teacher. I do respect therapists. And beyond that, my teachers, so to speak, never really allowed us to call them teachers. They didn't have students. It was like anathema to the teaching to have a student. We use it as Westerners, but it was like, we're learning to help you to be your autonomous, engaged, intimate, radically awake, autonomous creature.
How would they describe the relationship?
Kalyanamita was the word, and it's one of these beautiful words, Robin, that describe the basis of it is an agreement for non-collusion.
Wow.
In which, over time, you have someone finally, Alan, who's greeting your intensity and your dimensionality and equally inviting you through circumstance and opportunity to exceed and embody more radiant states of power, clarity.
Agreement for non-collusion in what? Delusion, self-deception?
I've often said, you know, one of the three most important qualities to ask anyone in a role of leadership is how you've learned from your denial, how you've learned from your self-deception, and how have you learned from your repression. And talk to me openly how you continue to learn from that if it's not too personal. But I don't want you to teach me from a place of having overcome them.
Right, got it. Yeah.
Those authority figures aren't what I learned in Burma. And even among the revolutionaries, with Aung San Suu Kyi, the prisoner of conscience, the Nobel laureate, and the 20,000 other political prisoners, it's such an asymmetrical dance of bringing the Dharma into complexity. To utilize a divine feminine-inspired use of voice to challenge violent patriarchy, men and women and guns, not just gender-based issues. And I learned so much about the art of psychological, spiritual, trans-spiritual wisdom in revolution. And that's why I'm really, really keen on taking the religiosity, taking the spirituality, and humanizing the animistic humanization of beingness, the art of relanguaging things so that they have intimate meaning as artists, as savants, that there's no two of us ultimately will do it alike. And then we take the religious war off the table, and how much ideology upon deities, gods, religions has the world needed to see to fill the oceans with tears and blood. And so I'm being very careful about, I would say, walking my own talk to hold myself more accountable to how I go about sharing what I consider to be true for me. And part of that, having been as an artist, and I say this repeatedly, get a notebook in which you can eliminate buying spiritual books. It's so easy to be influenced by the books and the influence of numbers and the influence of status, that the next thing you know, you don't even know how you've inherited. And I know and appreciate things that you get from books, but I think it's better to struggle with documenting your own liberation. And part of our 10-day retreat is every day, 3 times a day, we're going to have self-reflective exercises, which I've developed over the decades. So at the end of the retreat, you have your own Dharma book. That is the place you refer to. And a part of it is, you brought up a very beautiful point. I didn't remember even alluding to it, so that I learned from paying more attention. What do we mean by spiritual armor? What do we mean by boundaries? And how do I know it to be true? And how deep is that truth in the feminine fluidity of dimensional development? A truth is often seen as like, undeniable today, undeniable tomorrow. Is it really a truth, or is it kind of an insight that seems really appropriate this month? And that's not being a stickler. I like nuanced movies, even when people aren't talking, because there's a lot to be said in the language of emotionality, right? Like Robin does these she's an amazing guide on the somatic consciousness integration. And to listen to her, even in the few times I've had as a friend, the language of felt energy on the nervous system is so amazing, that language. And I recognize now more and more that so much of my meditative background was somatic based. You don't enter a monastery as a nun or a monk or a boy or a girl unless you first and foremost embody, embodiment as the basis of being. That's all you do. And if you want to hear a little bit, it's like people ask about meditation. The first thing people are encouraged to do is to move in a way throughout the day that reflects your dignity. That's the meditation instruction. I mean, it's like, really pay attention to everything? No, just inhabit innate stature. It's not like posing for your own idealized goddess, but it's like, how do you sit? Is there a proper way to sit? We had people there that had amputated legs. They can't do a full lotus. Other people that had so much pain from arthritis, they would sit against the wall, and occupy your dignity. Political prisoners, we ate with dignity. We cried in dignity. It's beautiful. And what is dignity? That's a very difficult emotion to know what it is in myself. The second one that we were encouraged to do was to take the speed out of our presence. Now, mind you, we were careful to enter a monastery, shave our head, wear the robes. We could leave at any time, but the deal when you're in the monastic setting is like the entheogen, is to create self-luminosity, to see the beauty of what you can learn about cognitive empiricism. Does that make sense? You become an empirical kind of yogi of feeling the nature of states of consciousness. So taking the speed out of things so you can occupy invisibility. I don't know about you, but pause, it's, where is compassion? If you weren't to actually deliberately embody giving food to someone who was hungry, what would the state of mind look like? How would you know it to be true? And so meditation in Buddhist psychology is the study, the felt cognitive empiricism, mindful intelligence of energy that's invisible. And so this is the term that we use, cognitive somatics. And that's like, oh wow, there's Dharma literacy is a term for a meditator in a monastery. Slowing down is one of the best ways to see what you normally don't see, because you take destination out of the process. And that was one of the gifts of the monastery, is to take orgasm out of the state. Take the next meal out of the day. Take the next sitting out of the sitting. Take the next breath out of the minute. And so, and I will end with this and open it up. People ask, what was the most basic instruction that you got? Neither wish to live nor fear dying, breath by breath. Occupy your dignity. Take the future momentum out of present as much as possible. Feel the impulsion of becoming. Be where you are with the art of noticing and learning. That's it. Trans-Buddhistic. So, thank you for shielding. Thank you for bringing it up, and other things that might be important to you that are curious. And I'm curious about you, like what psychedelics you've experimented with and what meditations you've done. Anyone dare to go on infinite record of any of that?
Did you have another question?
Yeah, you're talking about dignity.
Dignity.
So, what do you mean?
That came up last week too. It came up, the word dignity, and it just to reflect back to how I see it. I so admire someone who asks about the meaning of that. And because it just points right to a resonant instinct in us that I care. That's how I hear it. I care about human rights. The best kept secret on the planet, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. 30 articles agreed upon by men and women back in the 40s on what constitutes dignity and conscience. All beings are born equal in dignity and conscience. You can read it in the preamble. These 30 indelible freedoms are what constitute innate dignity beyond economic status, religion, and gender. And if we could learn to coexist and respect each other in our innate dignity and right to freedom, we will have a sacred civilization. It's the blueprint for civilized existence. The most abused 3-page document on the planet. Rwanda, genocide. Soviet Union, Stalin, 50 million. World War II, how many millions? World War I, how many millions? Vietnam. Libya, Syria, my country, invaded Iraq based upon an absolute lie that's shaming the entire world in our quest to spread democracy. Mr. Bush and the Democratic deep state, it goes on and on with Forever Wars Biden. You know, 1 million, we use the word civilians as if it's like, what the fuck are you even talking about? How about putting that girl and boy in the mirror of your wife and daughter and then call them by names that had mothers and fathers, right? Don't call them civilians as if they were somehow, well, we made a mistake. You know? The dehumanization of existence. Dignity is the humanization of existence. It's the basis of equality. It's the basis of decency. And so, not to get too carried away with it, but some of the ways that I understand it, it's inseparable from conscience. And one would ask, what does conscience mean? You know, that place of, why am I alive? Because there are things to do and there are things not to do, for God's sake. Okay? Keep your fucking hands off my daughter without consent, and even so, make consent minute to minute. Okay? There are rights and wrongs. There are goods and bads. You know, Dostoevsky, the great novelist, once said, I think, that God and the devil, you know, the battlefield is the human heart. Good and bad, right and wrong, God and the devil are fighting, and the battlefield is the human heart. Call it duality. I'm not into non-duality either. I'm into eradicating evil and illuminating good. And by illuminating good doesn't necessarily mean that you've eradicated evil. I've often said, and there's no joke, one rape on the planet is one too many. One war is beyond my understanding. It's a fucking bad design that we've been forced to live in. And so samsara is this design. And those who want to wake up from it don't want to capitulate and blend into it. You really want to be very careful, because the next thing you know, on a psychedelic, or you're making love, or you're walking the beach, next thing you know, out of the blue comes another Burma, another Tibet, another Rwanda, another Gaza, another Israel, another October 7th, another. Where do these eruptions come from? My brothers and sisters right now are in prison. I had 3 people that I know very well were executed last year in Burma, who were longtime meditators and singers and husbands and wives. It's just out of the blue. It could happen to me. And so dignity and conscience have urgency involved. And the art of noticing, to me, is coupled with the high art of, we call in Buddhist psychology, sanvega. Very beautiful term, which means I'm honoring this deep impulse in me that knows that there's time and grace and slowing down, but you know, I've got a little bit of an appetite. I'm gonna like work with you, guy. I think I love you, I got another bestseller on the horizon, but guess what? I've got my own existential, psychological, emotional agenda. It's called, I'm honoring my sanvega, the art, the power, the urge. It's a trans-purging consciousness. It's more of a kind of conscious instinct for freedom, Chomsky called it, that wants to know what I want to know that I don't know, want to learn what I don't know yet. I want to be free in dimensions beyond what I know already that are comfortable and good. And I want to do it for the sake of creating a better, more sacred world for the children's children, and the bugs, the birds, and the bees, and the ocean, and the universe. I want to explore. I want to honor my sanvega, conscience, urgency, dignity. How could we not talk about loyalty to integrity as an aspect of dignity? Who wants to be with? We all do it, right? We all deceive. But when you deceive other consciously or unknowingly, you know, kind of naughty. Let me help you out here, girl, boy. Okay? Open your mouth. Repeat after me. I beg of my delusion to begin to see that stumbling into honesty is more important than the comfort of deception. Okay? I want you to learn the fine art of quivering in the anxiety of your impulse to live in the conditioning of deception. I want you to saturate that in your psychedelic session. Self-honesty. Don't ever have to repeat it, but self-honesty. So self-honesty and honesty with other. Difficult words, I don't want to moralize, is a key element for me of integrity. I mean, I can handle it in a relationship if someone in a way tells me pretty close to the truth. I can deal with the gift of that. And I don't feel comfortable when I look back in the ways that I've tweaked my conscience with deliberate avoidance of telling the truth. I don't believe that you always have to tell the truth, like on the terms of excessive authenticity. Aung San Suu Kyi in Burma would often say, when they come to take your house, ask them, by what right do you have? They're going to take it and torture you anyway. What right? Put freedom into action. But there are times when they said, where is such and such hiding? And you have to say, it's not a question I want to answer, not to lie. So integrity, conscience, and dignity. And then the last one for me, along many other elements of the color of dignity, I get into how well do you occupy your raison d'etre, your purpose, your sense of, although I'm successful in the field of what I do, but it doesn't really empower and nurture my creative dignity. I want to take more risks, to live more in the honor of my voice in context with my chosen art. You know, so there's a degree of honoring a realignment toward risk-taking futures that allows dignity to expand based upon your adventure of living. You know, that kind of thing. So it's not a static thing in a monastery where you just embody your dignity. You see it as foundational until you die. And like I said it last week, and I'll end with this story here, is that Aung San Suu Kyi, my friend, I was blessed to do a book with her some years back called The Voice of Hope. But she's in solitary confinement, 78 years old, being tortured by being deprived of medical support, bed, 4 walls, no visitors, no phone, no books. She was the most famous woman in modern times, a female Mandela, a female Gandhi. And she empowered the divine feminine in revolutionary action in a culture devoured by toxic, violent dictatorship. And as a result, it's been a collective witch burning to put this woman and the women in the country behind bars. And they're forgotten because of vilification programs by a lot of the multimedia. Anyway, a friend, Sean Turnell, the economic advisor to her civilian government, is Australian. He was released from prison 6 months ago, 10 months ago, and he was in prison for 2 years in the same prison in Burma where she was prisoned. And he met her once, trying to get the recorded conversation to reveal something that they could use against her. But what she told him, among things that he's shared in the international media, is that she told him that the authorities offered me air conditioning in this isolated, sweltering prison cell that's often 100 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, with mosquitoes and scorpions and rats. I mean, it's like, what? A day in the life? Hard to imagine. And I said to them that I'd be happy to get one if the other 20,000 political prisoners got one first. That's dignity. Putting someone right there in front of your comfort, your security. There's something about, I'm not saying that extreme, but how well does someone who you're hanging with care with you, not for you, care with you? Like, you matter to me. That to me is an expression of dignity in action. It has heart, it listens, it learns. It's like, yes, I have restlessness at times, but I want to be here and show up in the best way I can. So those are some of the attributes that dignity. And I would encourage you, if you haven't looked at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it's obviously online. And the number one, I think, is right up at the top, is freedom of expression, freedom of speech. I don't know why that is so threatening to support each other in radical sharing as the vocation of what semi-intelligent life does. They use language to communicate rather than the club and the gun and the drone and the nuke. It's so out there to see what primarily these men in suits and uniforms do as natural, and yet I want to go, where is the scream? You know, right now, obviously, Palestine is taken front and center for people as an act of protest and conscience around the world. And it's not to say that I know the best course of action, or that what happened on October 7th wasn't despicable, or that what's happened in the years past, but you've got to, that's samsara. Human beings do that to each other all throughout history. And what is the lesson? Women know it. Don't hit me, dude. No, don't yell at me. Talk with me. Let's do this together. And in Burma, when they did the art of the dialogue, they just did are you kidding me? And as a result, it's so terrifying, the intimacy of communion, that they're torturing the women. So anyway, thank you for the question, but dignity is just so rad. You had a question or something you wanted to share? Robin, you had anything? Or take your time.
For one more?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious to hear on a personal level, you talked about samsara and human-generated conflict, human-generated complexity, and you've talked about this self-assisted psychedelic therapy, and I'm wondering if you can share an example of how you've used in a personal process that form of inquiry to be with a self-generated state of conflict inside. Like, how do you navigate?
How do you navigate
from that
self-generated
conflict, inner conflict, to beautiful states of mind?
Asking, how do you navigate self-generated conflict and develop beautiful states of mind?
Yeah. Noticing process.
That is I use a number of different words. It's the function of mindful intelligence, which is the conscious employment of the factors of consciousness that implicitly have patience, stamina, noticing, discernment, and inquiry in it. And you employ it, obviously, within consciousness, because that's wherever we go, as it's been said, we carry consciousness. And so wherever we go, generally speaking, we are embodied. There's no great stretch of imagination that consciousness is not embodied, but it's embodied and it may exceed deeper dimensions, inside, outside, or beyond both. So wherever we go, there's consciousness and embodiment. And it's obvious to some that within embodiment there are 6 basic senses. The eye sees, the ear hears, the nose, the tongue, the mind, and the body. So noticing or mindful intelligence is employing the act of noticing mindfully and intelligently to that which is most predominant when it arises at the portal that you are occupying. Right now, you and I, all of us, are hanging out in kind of a 6-dimensional, 6-portal presence. We're not touching each other physically, We are looking, we're hearing, we're not necessarily using, we're not tasting, but we're using the eye and the ear and consciousness. It's sort of a sapio-eroticized space. We're employing consciousness and the art of discernible language to employ how to understand, how to occupy complexity that's self-generated. And it's very difficult to do that without things like, what? How can I get inside of you to give you a taste of you? And really what that amounts to is to come and see for yourself. And the way that I have learned this is you can't escape the vocation of meditation. And I know that's really a kind of trigger word for people because there's so many ways to frame that are generally thought of. Like here in Ubud, you meet so many people that have done Goenka style 9 and 10 day Vipassana retreats. And when you think of that, you think of silence, you think of being gifted the retreat, and you think of primarily a very rigid schedule of sitting and coming back to sitting. That's one form of meditation in a context that's very specific. I don't know how you can learn how to overcome self-generated conflict or feel any fluency with beautifying states of consciousness without an engaged, sustained, mentor, so-called practitioner-student role in a very sacred context. I'm very careful not to use retreat or Vipassana. This is why I don't teach, but now that I've been invited to have an opportunity to offer this 10-day trans retreat in Ubud, is going to be an opportunity, Robin, to actually abide together in guided spaces to point out how that's done in real time so that there's more proficiency for people to understand how they're doing it and how they can do it better and more intimately in different postures. And let me just pause here. In a monastery, why I chose the teachers and the Kalyanamitas that I did, it wasn't meditation per se. It was an all posture employment of presence in the context of consciousness in your 6 senses. And so we were absolutely encouraged from day one, wherever you are, walking, sitting, bending, eating, answering the call of nature, lying down, getting up, dreaming, bathing, shaving, everything you do is of equal status to your idea of thinking that when you get to the meditation hall and close your eyes, that's the best place to meditate. I want you to take the speed out of getting there. And so that was a very interesting putting me into a logical full Nelson with what meditation meant. Reaching for the door. How well we were asked so many times, talk to me about embodying your arm. And it's not just the sensations, but it's the states of mind that are happening so quickly that if you're not aware of it, restlessness can define your week. Self-judgment can define your hour. Anticipation and nervousness of what I'm going to be saying and how it's going to be received can define the minute. You learn the art of not picking up, the art of staying present, the art of opening the mind to the next generation of beauty. 3 things: relaxing, occupying, enhancing. And you're brought to this over and over and over again. What did you see? What did you notice? And then what did you do? In the absence of a beautiful state of mind, everyone was encouraged to come back to what's most predominant in what you're doing, which was basically using the body as the basis of being in dignity and presence. And what do you feel? And in the absence of the body, breathing. Oh my God, another breath. neither wish to live nor fear dying. Oh my God, damn it, hurry up and bring on death. I'm just so bored with watching my F-U-C-K breath. Relax that thought. I don't want to relax that thought, talking to yourself. I am not my thought. I am not the person who commented on I'm not that thought. There's no thought worth thinking as a meditator in this environment. And you go, got it. So you would begin to identify with mindful intelligence, not the thinker of more and more refined thoughts. And therefore the states of mind become more and more discernible rather than this is who I am. And then people begin to be asked, what does freedom mean in direct experience? And so it evolves over time. The next thing you know, a week have gone by, a month have gone by, and you feel really comfortable in occupying beautiful states of mind because through the employment of mindful intelligence, now they're arising independent of effort. The idea of someone meditating day to day is pretty much not on the table. It's happening freely and in momentum. And that's when all of a sudden, oh my God, you can't even think to keep up with the radiance of rapture, of calm, of equanimity. And the teacher is saying, what do you see? What do you know? And how did it behave? And if you begin to identify with rapture and it disappears, you feel forlorn. So you begin to see, and that too. A much more intimate relationship is abiding with than identifying with. Freedom over occupation. So neither wish to live nor fear die. It's sort of a nutshell. And I would only encourage, if one is feeling that urge to be more and more refined as a kind of cognitive empiricist, aesthete. It's the art of cognitive aesthetics, to be more and more nuanced with consciousness as you're embodied. To put it on your horizon, which we've talked about, to be in the vicinity of other boys and girls employing that. And I've never seen a bigger gift that I've given myself than that gift of, for lack of better terms, a retreat. But it depends, yeah. I've seen you before. Is that true?
I don't think so.
What is your name?
Mickey.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming out. I'm Alan. Anything I can answer for you or talk with you about, or?
You know, this is my first time here. I was outside of the country, and I find your little wisdom really, I was very touched by the idea of human dignity, and I am going to go home and read the Universal, what did it say?
The Universal Declaration of Human Rights?
Yeah, I mean, believe it or not, I've not heard of that before.
Yeah, that's a crucial document, even more than the Bible.
And I am a former Peace Corps volunteer, and that's where I really relate to, you know, the whole idea of human dignity. And now I have to deal with my own human dignity as I age, and as I realize I am losing certain strengths that I had.
Right.
And that is pretty difficult, but it is. And I get something out of what you're saying. It's just sort of like really encouraging me. It's in this world right now. It's just so overwhelming. I see all these things, and it's like it's really nothing I can do about it. I mean, as an individual, I can try to have that honest integration with somebody else, but the whole picture is overwhelming, and the idea of basically, you know, dealing with my own dignity and how I interact with everybody, that's all I can really do.
Beautiful.
And that's sort of what you're saying, and I really enjoy hearing that. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, just immediately feel not your vulnerability, but maybe that too, but my own sensitivity and the poignancy of being embodied to state something so obvious, but so overlooked is this impermanence of, and how we imbue dimensions of that transition called birth to aging with qualities, with mobility, with beauty, ageism, culturalism, how we have adopted and inherited certain beliefs and misbeliefs that we judge unknowingly and shame ourselves for as we disintegrate, age, disease, and die, And everyone is in the same kind of odd, strange existential embodiment. At some time or another, we'll have to come to those universal conditions. With birth comes uncertainty. And it's not just aging and disease. How many people at this very moment around the world are dealing with unspeakable horrors, right? Unspeakable. And it's so important at times to understand the importance of disassociation, because what can you do? The overwhelming nature of contemplating existence. So it comes back to a phrase that I learned from a friend of mine. Even in a country undergoing genocide and radical oppression and denigration of basic human rights, like in my country of Burma, they believed in our revolution would be successful one person at a time.
Well, that theoretically is what Buddhism is.
Yeah. And if you can bear with me a little bit, and you're free to do whatever you need, but one thing that stayed with me over the years that's been a very, very helpful teaching. I was invited to do a book of conversations with the Nobel Peace Laureate Aung San Suu Kyi when she was released from house arrest in 1995. I was a former Buddhist monk in her country. We shared the same Buddhist teachers. Anyway, and eventually I had my first meeting with her. And every meeting was framed by our first and last. She never knew, or any of her colleagues, when the gulag and the secret police would come and arrest or kill or torture, which obviously it's ongoing. And so every encounter became so important. And so every question became the first and last. And so I asked her, Aung San Suu Kyi, you call your country's struggle for freedom a revolution of the spirit. And I wanted to know what you mean in essence about that. And in a nutshell, she said, Alan, you were out on the street. There were maybe 500 people gathered. All of them risked losing their home, their job, their wealth, their money, their freedom to co-occupy the solidarity of a non-violent presence, knowing that the result of that could lead and likely would lead to the loss of everything. She said, Alan, that takes courage. So I paused right there. The empowerment of courage in our life to patiently, with forbearance, deal with the inevitable. My mom died at 96. My mom looked at me in her wheelchair and says, Alan, you're still young. I can't even hold your hands with the arthritis. I can't get out of my chair without help. I cannot even go to the call of nature without somebody doing that for me. And it takes my breath even to think of that level. We're all in it. And she said, courage, Alan. And courage must be coupled with the courage to care about things larger than your own self-interest. That's why I say that the revolution will be successful one person at a time. But let me tell you, she said, and this is in a nutshell, that to be on in that street, we didn't say that overcoming fear was preferable than to feeling fear. We learned a word from our shared teacher, the Pali Buddhist Burmese word for it, I don't know at the moment, and it translates as, it's a very beautiful word, I'm not sure it translates in English so skillfully, but learning to quiver at the edge of complexity. Positively quiver is another way of feeling, mindfully, intelligently, courageously co-occupying the confluence of complexity with beauty. And that's where he encouraged us to not overcome fear, but to learn the art of quivering. Those people in the audience, you didn't see them because you're looking at me, but a lot of them are crying out of quivering. They know they're going to lose everything. They're quivering. They know they're going to gain everything. They're quivering. And she went like that, like a real sonnet, a poem. And it stayed with me that I have every right to live in a quivering dignity with the uncertainty of knowing what I'll do, except that I'm quivering with courage. It's helped me to understand that more and more, one person at a time. And although we may lose our cognitive functions, my best friend as a monk died of early onset Alzheimer's. And I was watching him as he lost short-term memory, even of his wife's name, who I introduced him to, and married with a child. You know what? He remembered his time as a monk, which he had pretty much neglected and forgotten. And we did a series of talks together called the Dharma of Alzheimer's. And so rather than seeing the decline of his cognition, we empowered it as the resurrection of his freedom. It didn't go over big with some people, but he rocked on with it until he died young. It's sad to die, right? It's sad to lose what we love. But that's the poignancy. But keeping that dignity alive. My friends in prison said, you know, they can do what they want to us, but my dignity is not theirs to take. And me as an American goes, F-U-C-K-U. That's what I say to you, warmongers. That's what I say to you, apathists. That's what I say to you, Xi Jinping and Putin and all you crazy people, that I too could do the very same thing that you do. I saw that in war zones, that I got to stop my righteous blame and judgment, Mr. Dude. That just the turn of the dice, and you're the very one who you then could be vilified by the spiritually righteous, right? So dignity is coupled with deep, deep humility and self-compassion as we transition into whatever it is that you want to navigate. The last point that I would not be in good standing without sharing with you, I wrote a book with a friend a couple of years back, sort of outmoded and outdated, called Facing Death. It was our way to be in dialogue about the very things you're bringing up. And an essence point in it for me is that death and aging doesn't mean anything other than transitioning in life towards a navigatable future. And I don't know how you hold the future, whether you're a rebirther or a real rebirther or a real rebirther, a bodhisattva, the Dalai Lama, the 13th incarnation of the Dalai Lama, the 13th incarnation of Brahman. I mean, really? I mean, rebirth is like real only for Tibetans, but not us? I mean, so I don't know, so my way of saying, maybe there's imagination right now with your dignity. Like, where does my imagination go? This is where the psychedelic and the entheogen are very, very interesting. How to employ cognitive adventure and to transcend the need, namaste to all the people who need healing, but transcend the need, at least for this session, in healing and go like, you know, I think I'm going to think out of the box of healing and trauma, and I'm going to like navigate a possible future through wonderment and mystical adventure. What do I want to do next month that I haven't done in this life? That I still can do while I walk and talk and move, not just being present. You know what I'm saying? Tinder for terminal, you know? You know, ayahuasca for terminal. Whatever it is, we're all terminal, right? No one's going to get out alive. So, namaste to all of you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. And next Something Tuesday, if you're interested, bring your friends. We'll get down. Nice to meet you. I hope there was something powerful for you. And thank you from my heart. Nice to see you. And thank you for turning in. See you again.